Okay, you're ready to brew. I don't know if you've seen my equipment episode. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. This is what you're going to need to brew with. Today we're going to brew an English Pale Ale. It's a kit made by Brewer's Edge. I believe they're LD Carlson is the company that runs that. But anyway, a word of caution before we start. Number one, there's going to be hot boiling liquids, and they're sticky, so best not to spill them on yourself. Number two, if you're under the legal drinking age of your company, this isn't for you. I suppose you can watch and learn, but don't brew until you're of legal age in your country to drink, unless, of course, you're going to brew it for your dad and give it to him as a present. But that being said, not for you kiddies. We're going to brew with this brewer's kit right here. It's, like I said, it's an English Pale, which is going to be a bitter, basically, just a different name for a bitter. We'll go through and find out what's inside here, show you all the stuff, give you a little talk about what they are, but we'll see them all in action shortly here. But anyway, opening up the box, you got your instruction sheet. If you haven't brewed before, I suggest that you look through that. We have a can, 3.3 pound can of light malt extract. That's real thick and syrupy stuff. We also have priming sugar. If you're going to bottle it, you'll need that. We won't be bottling it. This will be going in a keg, so we'll just toss that aside. We got 2 bags of dry malt extract, which is really powdery, basically evaporated wort. So we've got 2 bags of that, 1 pound each. And then we've got 3 bags of hops. They're pellet hops, nitrogen packed and foil packets there. We have our crushed grain. This is what we'll steep in. We also have a big pack of bottling gaps. If you needed it to bottle, it comes with them too, but we're not going to be using those. We'll toss them aside. We have our yeast. It's dry yeast. This is Nottingham variety. Be a good yeast for this beer. And then this is those mucilin bags that I was telling you about. I don't know if you can see it as I shake it there, all the pieces of lint coming off of this thing. You can use this. I'm not going to because of the lint. Like I said, if you watch my equipment video, I have that nylon mesh bag, which will do the same thing. But if you were going to use this, it opens up like a big sock. And you just put your grains in there, and then you tie a knot in the top, and you can sink this in your pot. But I always worry that this lint's going to come out in my beer, so I don't tend to use it. The other thing you're going to need to brew is a beer. It would insult the beer gods, or whoever you look to make your beer good, would insult them not to be thoroughly drunk by the time you're done brewing. So let's get started. These are the little pieces of lint that come off of these bags. This is why I suggest the nylon bag. If I shake it, rub it, you'll probably see a few more come off. There we go, there's some dust bunnies. And that's why I don't like these mucilin bags. They will work, but all those pieces of lint, would you like that floating in your glass? I sure wouldn't. All right, our next step is to fill our pot with water. The kit recipes say that this kit works with 2.5 gallons of water. I wouldn't worry real much about being exact to that mark. It'll affect your hop bittering a little bit. But, you know, if you only get a 3-gallon pot, we're not going to want to put 2.5 gallons of water in here. That's going to cause you trouble. I have a 4-gallon pot here. I'm going to roughly estimate 2.5 gallons of water. I'm not, like I said, I wouldn't worry about being exact with it. It's just water. It's really not going to affect the beer that much. A little bit on your bittering, but not too much. So we'll just fill up that pot, and we'll get started with the rest of it here soon. You got to get the water in the pot heated to 164 degrees, and then we'll show you what to do next. Alright, as you can see, our water has come up to temp. Nice 160, looks like about 162. Close enough. The directions call for 150 to 165. Alright, our water's come up to temp, so we're going to go ahead and add our grains to our steeping bag and steep the grains. I go on the higher end of the steeping scale because it's not going to be on heat anymore. I don't want it cooling down below that lower portion because I want to make sure I get all the color and sugars out of these grains as it's in there. I also wanted to give you one more quick note about water. If your tap water like mine tastes good, go ahead and use it. If not, you can use spring water And if you're extract brewing only, you can even get away with distilled water. You can't do that with if you're going to make your own wort without adding a bunch of chemicals or anything to it. But if you're going to be using extracts, all those chemicals that they use to make their wort are still in there. So let's go ahead and cut our bag open. And we'll dump it in our steeping bag. Real easy to do. Just kind of overturn it on in there. And make sure you get it all in there. And the nice thing about these steeping bags, they got this little handle. We can just hang that right over the edge of the pot, put our lid on it, and let it sit for 20 minutes. And then we'll be back. We'll turn the heat up and get this to a boil, and then we'll add our extracts, and we'll be brewing. So have a beer, enjoy yourself. This is a good time. All right, 20 minutes has elapsed. Our grains have been steeping. We'll pop the lid off, and as you can see, the color from the 60 Love Crystal Malt, it's changed the water considerably. It's a nice, kind of a deep red right now. Of course, that'll get watered down in your final beer, and you'll get some other color from your dry malt and light malt extracts. But now, see how handy that little string came out to be? We'll just let this bag drain. We don't want to lose any of that color or flavor that's still in there. Now, you don't want to squeeze this bag. There's no point in rushing this process. Matter of fact, now that the bag's out of there, we can go ahead and turn the water back on, or the heat back on, and start getting this to a boil as quickly as we can. When all of your water's just about out of this, you can use the lid or have a bowl handy or something to put this bag in. You don't want to drip this sticky stuff all over your floor on the way to the sink. And then I'd let it cool down for a good half hour, 40 minutes before you attempt to get the grain out of the bag. Now, if you were using the mucilin bag, you could just toss it in the trash. One of the advantages of the mucilin is that it's disposable. You get one with every kit, but for my purposes, I would prefer to do this than have to have lint in the beer. You'd still drain the mucilin bag just like this. Well, it looks like it's just about done. I'll just take my lid here and go over to the sink. All right, as you can see, I have my can of liquid malt extract sitting in the sink. It's actually sitting in warm water, and the reason you'd want to do that is because the liquid malt extract, when it's cold, is about as thick as tar, and if you get it a little bit warm, it makes it a whole lot easier to pour into your brew kettle. So soak it in some hot water, or even boil another pot on the stove and put it in there for a little while. Get this stuff good and warm. Probably don't want the can so hot that it'll burn you. That's why I always just put it in tap water. All right, as you can see, we've started to come to a boil. Now all we've done so far is steep the grains. Now we're going to add our malt extract, both the dry type and the liquid type. So what we're going to do first is kill the heat, because this stuff's thick. It takes a little while to dissolve. We don't want it burning on the bottom of the pan while that's happening. We will start with the dry extract because it does take a little longer to dissolve than the light extract. So just cut your bag open, and I would cut the bag all the way open if you can, because if the steam hits this, it will stick to the inside of the bag. So just dump it in there real quick. And see where it's stuck already, just where the steam hit. See the mess? That's a little bit of lost stuff there. So that's kind of why you want to get it in there quick. And go ahead and cut our second bag open. And just get it in there as quick as you can. And then we'll stir it up. It should be noted too that, yeah, I know my spoon's a bit overkill for this, but I normally brew 5 gallons. Sorry about that. At a time, this spoon is a little bit long. I normally brew 5 gallons at a time, and you need a big spoon to get to the bottom of that pot. But looks like our malt extract is just about dissolved, so we'll go ahead and put the light in, or the liquid in, and we'll give it a good stir. Make sure we get it all dissolved. Just take your can opener and open up your can. Now, this stuff is thick and it's very sticky, so and we'll pour it in. And remember, that's what it's like when it's warmed up. Also, it should be noted that you probably, whatever size pan you're using to make your, you want to make sure that you have room to add all this stuff. If you wanted to, you could put, you know, this can in there as you fill it with water to make sure that you don't exceed the volume of your pot. This stuff takes a little while to get out of the can. It's, I don't know if you can see that from your angle, but it's still pouring out. What we're going to do, now that we've got it pretty much in there, is I'm going to take this can and I'm going to dip it in here and get some of that hot water out. And I'm going to take a spoon and I'm going to kind of stir it up and really liquefy that stuff. You don't want to lose any of this. You want to make sure it all gets used. It all ends up in the pan. I gotta warn you, you may want to wear or use a pot holder or something for doing this if your hands aren't made of cast iron like mine are. Give it one more dip. Get all that out of there. Because the can does tend to get a little warm when you put boiling water in it. Okay, there, it's all in. I'll continue to stir until we're pretty sure we got all of that dissolved in there. And then we'll turn the heat back on and bring it to a boil. Okay, we're just coming to a boil, as you can see, and we're going to put our first addition of hops in. These are your bittering hops. Make sure you note the time that you add your first hops, because everything now depends upon time. These hops have to boil for 60 minutes. Now, when you put your hops in, this greatly increases your chances of having a boil over. So as we put these in, if it starts to boil over, simply cut your heat off and stir, and it'll go away. So here we go. Here goes the hops. These are Fuggles, by the way. Always a good idea to smell the hops that you're putting in so you get an idea of their flavor profile and their scent profile. So these are the Fuggles. They're 4.2% alpha acid. There's 1 ounce of them, and they're going in first. And then just stir. And as you can see, here comes the boil over. Cut your heat. Try to keep it in your pan. Stir it down. And those are pellet hops, by the way. You can use whole leaf, but if you use whole leaf, they absolutely have to be strained out before they can go in your fermenter. The pellet hops can either be strained or not strained. And as you can see, all that foam and stuff is now gone, so we're okay to turn our heat back on and bring this back to a boil. Now remember, mark your time that you start to boil again. These will have to boil for 60 minutes. Your recipe may vary, but usually your bittering hops are 60-minute boil. And we'll bring it to a boil, and we got to wait 40 minutes before we add our next hops. Stir it occasionally in the meantime. That'll probably be all you'll see of me until the next hop addition. Okay, so 40 minutes has elapsed. We got 20 minutes left in the boil. It's now time to add our flavoring hops. For this particular beer, they're using Tetning at an alpha acid content of 4.8%. So pretty much all you got to do, open your bag of hops, it's 3/4 of an ounce, and dump it in. The risk of boil over should be long past by now. So dump it in, stir it up. I don't know if you can see it on there, but the water levels dropped substantially just from the evaporation from the boil. And that's about it for your second addition of hops. Our next addition is considered the Aroma Hops. We'll be putting those in about 15 minutes, and they are Cascades. Okay, another 15 minutes have passed. It's time to add our aroma hops, and they chose Cascade for this. Alpha acid content 5%. Now, if you ever have the opportunity, I highly recommend you smell your bag of Cascade hops. That's my favorite hop in the world, and if you ever smell them, you'll understand why. They are truly wonderful. So, in a pot they go. And these will boil for 5 minutes. Though, if I wasn't following the recipe exactly, I may have chose to actually dry hop these. At this point, they're not going to add any bittering to the beer. They're just going to be there for scent. But my experience with dry hopping is you'll get a lot more scent and a little bit of the flavor from the Cascade hops on a dry hop. But like I said, I'm trying to follow the directions exactly for your first beer because that's probably what you'll do. So you can use this as a reference, or you can read the instructions for yourself. Either way, I'm fine with it. Okay, on a final note, we're approaching the end of our boil. We actually have 1 minute left. And we'll be done with the boiling portion of this. So at this point, what you want to do is you want to get a lid on this. And the reason you want to get it on now is to let that steam sanitize the lid. At this point, once this is done boiling, every single thing that touches this beer has to be sterile. You do not want an infection, you will get a bad beer. At this point, everything has to be sterile. So we'll let this go for the full minute to get all that steam and heat in there to kill anything that may or may not be living on that lid. We don't want to take the chance and risk an infection. All right, so the next step in the brewing process is we have to get our wort cool. And if you don't have a wort chiller or anything like that, the easiest way to do it is going to be in your sink. We're in a sink full of cold water, and we'll put the whole pot right in there, and we'll have to change the water out 5 or 6, 7, 8 times until that wort gets down to a nice cool temperature. Take the temperature that your tap water runs at, because remember, we're going to add water to this, and you know, if your tap water is running at 50 degrees and you're going to need to add 3 gallons of it, you can probably cool your wort to 90 and definitely get to a safe pitching temperature. So I'm going to go grab the pot, throw it in the sink, run a little extra water, and see what happens. And that's going to be pretty much it. You're going to have to change this water out a few times until this gets cool. And remember, when you take the temperature of this, make sure your thermometer is sterilized, because you do not want an infection. Everything that touches this beer from this point on has to be sterile. All right, while we got our beer cooling down, let's talk a little bit about sanitation. Sanitation is the most important part about brewing beer. You can't make good beer without good sanitation. Tonight I'm going to be using Sanstar, which is an oxygen-based sanitizer. The only fault of this sanitizer is it has a tendency to foam, but that shouldn't be a problem for us tonight. The instructions, it's a no-rinse sanitizer, but the instructions say that it is 1 ounce per 5 gallons. I'm going to use a ½ an ounce. It's got a handy little measuring thing right here. And I'm going to make 2.5 gallons of sanitizing solution. And everything that's going to touch this beer from this point out will have to come in contact with that sanitizer for at least 2 minutes to ensure that it's safe to use. So all we'll do is we'll squeeze it here, take the cap off, make it easier to squeeze. And we'll squeeze it here until we get to the ½ ounce mark. And we'll put that right in our fermenter. So it'll go right in. Make sure we get all of it. It's a little thick, it's very concentrated stuff. I think this bottle ran me about $15, it says right there on it. And I've had it for about 2 years, so the price may have gone up some since then, but that'll make a lot of sanitizing solution. And then we're just going to take hot water and fill our bucket. Sorry, I'll fill it in a second. We're going to fill our bucket up to about 2.5 gallons so that we have enough solution to do what we're going to do. And then I'll get back. All right, I've got my bucket filled with sanitizing solution now. The foam is actually up to about a little over the 5 gallon mark. The water level is at 2.5 gallons. Like I said, this sanitizer has a tendency to foam up really bad, which is why I don't use it a whole lot. I use the Ida 4. But in our application today, it's not going to bother me with the foam. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to get everything that's going to touch the beer sanitized. Even though this won't touch the beer, we still want it clean, we still want it sanitized. So this is our 3-piece airlock. Little cap came off, and it goes. All the parts of it, in they go. We have our hydrometer, which is what we're going to use to make sure that we brewed correctly. In it's going to go. Just drop it right in there. Be careful, it's a delicate instrument. You don't want to break it. They're like $7 or $8. And my thief, which is probably what I may end up using to read the specific gravity initially. It might make it easier for you to see, I don't know. So it's going to go in there. I can't fit the whole thing in there, so I'm going to pick it up, I'm going to tilt it, I'm going to get everything in there clean and sanitized. Alright, I want to get this sanitizer all over it. I want to roll it around, I want to get that liquid everywhere in there, and make sure it's good sanitized, and I'll just throw it back in there so it doesn't touch anything. And the lid. Again, this shouldn't contact the beer. We're just going to ram that thing in there, get it covered in sanitizer solution. We're going to pick up the sanitizer with our hand and just kind of wipe it all over the inside of this bucket so that everything gets in contact with this sanitizing solution. We're also going to get our thermometer, and I'm going to dip a shot glass in here so that I have a little bit of shot to keep my thermometer good and sanitized, so I can start to take the temperature of my beer so that I'll know when it's cold enough that we can dump the beer in here, add the yeast, add our water, and finish brewing. Okay, my beer's now been cooled to about 87 degrees. You can pitch your yeast anywhere from about 85 degrees to about 65 degrees. It'll do just fine. That's for an ale yeast. So the beer's cool. Everything's been washed, cleaned, sanitized. We're not going to have any problems there. Basically, all we're going to do now, and you would have a choice at this point, you can just take that wort with the hops in it and just dump it right in the bucket, which is what I'm going to do. Or you could go ahead and sanitize a colander, have somebody help you hold the colander, unless you can find one that fits your bucket pretty well, and strain those pellet hops out. The advantage there is, if you're not going to secondary ferment, I would definitely strain those hops out. If you're going to secondary ferment, most of them are going to settle the bottom with the trub, the dead yeast, and all that. And when you go to the secondary, if one or two of them come up, they're going to settle out again, and they're not going to end up in your final beer. However, if you're going to go right from here to bottling, I would definitely strain those hops out, or they're going to end up in your final beer. And you don't really want to see a little green chunk floating around your beer. Nobody likes that. You want a nice, clean, good beer. That's what we're trying to make. So we're going to take our cooled beer here. So the lid's been on the whole time, except for the one time I took the temperature when I thought it was cool enough. We're going to pick the pot up, and we're just going to dump it in. That little chunky stuff at the end there, I don't know if you saw that, was the hops in here. There's your leftover pellet hops. Most of them had already started to drop out of solution just with the cold temperature. Them going in there is not going to hurt anything. They will settle out with the trub and all that. So our next step is we got to get this to 5 gallons of water. I'm just going to fill it up with water from the tap. If you need to use distilled water or bottled water at this point, that's fine. There's gradations on the side of the, oh, you can't see it. There's gradations on the side. We're looking for the 5 gallon mark. So I'll pause it here and fill it up, and then I'll show you what to do from there. Okay, I filled my bucket up with the cold water. I'm not going to bother to take a temperature reading on it. I don't care that much. This is the point, if you really wanted to, is the time to take your specific gravity, which is how much sugar is in a beer. I don't know if you can see, but there's a lot of foam in here because I use my spray wand for my sink to fill this bucket because my hose isn't, or my sink isn't quite tall enough. So at this point, this is where my thief comes in really handy, and I'll show you how that thing works. Right over here is my thief. Okay, we're just going to dip it in there. I'm going to go ahead and stir this up, make sure my sugar and the water I added are well mixed together. Dip it down in here, and I'm going to pull it up. And sometimes it doesn't stay, but I don't get very much that time. my tips broke off on it due to shutting it in a drawer, so sometimes it's a little hard to use, but eventually it'll make a good seal. Whoop, shoot, I shouldn't have shook it. Just trying to knock some of the foam off for you. But, okay, there we go anyway. Now, we'll take our hydrometer, and you want to kind of give it a spin as it goes in to shake the bubbles off that are in there. And you can get a reading by the graduations on the side. You take it right there at the water level, and it looks like we're at about 145, which is dead on for where this beer is. I rarely do this step because, frankly, I don't care. What sugar's in there is in there. There's nothing more you can do with it. I can't add sugar at this point. It's not sanitized. So I really don't care. Some people really do care about their original gravity. I'm not one of those brewers. If I think my fermentation is stuck or something like that, I will take some specific gravity readings, but that's much later on in the process. So anyway, continuing on, our next step is to add our yeast. We're using a dry yeast. It came with the kit. It's Nottingham yeast. By the way, this was dipped in sanitizer too, as well as the scissors. I didn't show you that, but like I said, everything that touches this beer from this point on needs sanitized. And we'll just dump the yeast in. Nothing hard about that. Now, take your lid, pop your lid on. Make sure it's got a good seal all the way around. Get your little 3-piece airlock. And you're looking for water just up above, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but just up above the little air holes on that center cap. And then we'll pop our little top cap onto that and stick it in the hole. And that's it. You've brewed. You're now a home brewer. In about 12, 14 hours, this will start fermenting. CO2 will start bubbling out of the airlock. In about 3 to 5 days, that'll stop. At that point, this is beer. It's not carbonated, but it is beer. And at that point, I'll move it into a secondary fermenter. I'll show you how you do that. And we'll let it secondary ferment, which is just an aging process. And it allows all the haze-causing things and yeast and hop pellicles to finish settling out of the beer, so we'll get a really nice beer when we bottle it or keg it. So anyway, thanks for watching. That's how to make beer. I hope your beer comes out as good as I know mine will. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, click subscribe, click like. It means a lot to me. I really appreciate you watching. Thank you.